Welcome to the Board Policy Review Committee for the Board of Public Utilities for February 19th, 2025. Roll call, please.
Are you all for the committee?
Just us three.
Okay, thank you for roll call. Mulvaney Henry,
Here.
Parker,
Here.
Brenneman.
Here.
You have your quorum.
Thank you. We'd like to welcome Board Member Gonzalez for joining the Policy Committee this evening. We're talking about board policy, so appreciate your attendance tonight. Okay, so we've called to order. We're going to so we have talked about previously, well, I think we all know I brought it up at the regular session, sort of maybe a move to having a consent agenda for BPU, as well as a couple of other items. But I wanted to, I guess we haven't had a substantive discussion about a consent agenda and what that might look like going forward. And I know that the team has put in the folder what the UGs looks like. And so I don't know if folks have had an opportunity to review that or not. Mary, did you want to see that?
That's okay.
Okay. Do you have a copy of it, Rob? Could you? Oh, here we go.
There it is.
Of course it does. Okay, so, and I mean, these are, I mean, Brett, I'm confident both of you guys know how consent agendas work. And so the things that I brought it up in particular with the financial report that's traditionally given by Lori, which will, I guess, henceforth be given by Andrew. Is that right, Mr. General Manager?
Here, somebody on his team. Yes.
Okay.
Most likely him.
Okay.
Randy sometimes would fill in for Lori, I know that, so
Okay.
could be Randy as well.
And so, you know, that's just one item that we had on there. There are times where, you know, we've got, hey, we've got this team member, we're going to appoint them to be our representatives for Western Fuels, you know, things like that, where they're getting up, doing official resolutions for these things. Not that the resolutions won't still exist. They will still exist, correct, Angie?
Correct.
Right. They'll still exist, but it'll just be like, hey, board, go through this list of these small items, right? That we don't need to have a lot of discussion on. We don't need to have, you know, and I'm not saying we don't need to have discussion on financials. I don't want to say that. But at the end of the day, I mean, we're getting the financials in advance. Our financials are put on our website. They are public information. I know that the finance committee of the board, the subcommittee no longer meets because it was meeting, listening to that presentation, and then going into the boardroom and listening to that presentation. I mean, to me, that's just a lot of, not the financials are extremely important. We want to know where we are. But I think that as long as we allow folks the opportunity, which, you know, if we kind of follow the UG's approach to this, I mean, you could still pull an item from the consent agenda. If you think there needs to be more discussion about it, there, you know, may need to be more discussion about it. And the other thing I think, and you know, Jeremy, you may have some ideas on this as well. I mean, maybe it's not a, you know, a monthly thing, or even I guess a monthly thing. Maybe there can be a cadence where, you know, the finance team does something on a less frequent basis, but does it maybe more comprehensively. But I'd like your thoughts on that.
Yeah, sure. So, you're correct. The efforts were being duplicated, right, from one meeting to another. So I think we all agree, and you just spoke to the fact that the financials are important. That's a large part of fiduciary responsibility, right? But what I talked with the team about is if you chose to do this, it's probably still, number one, important if something comes up that we just ad hoc at it. Number two, that we do, you know, you establish a regular cadence for the finance committee meeting. And three, that we do a quarterly financial presentation, so that you can, you know, get the finer points of kind of what was in the leading up to.
And so board members, I'm interested in your thoughts, I guess, on sort of this all together.
My thought would be that if we decide, you know, if we decide to not have or to put the financial on a consent agenda, that possibly the finance committee would start meeting again and they would be, the financials would be presented to them. And then if there was anything that was flagged as unusual or whatever, then they could request that it be pulled off the consent agenda at the regular meeting. But at least somebody would still be looking at financials on a regular basis. And maybe then go to a quarterly, like I say, not necessarily have it at every meeting, but a quarterly.
Yeah, I feel like, I know I'm not on this committee, but I feel like,
I'm gonna let Brett on the committee speak. Just kidding.
I feel like
I yield my time.
we need to, thank you, need to have a public presentation, at least quarterly, I feel like, because I don't want somebody to say, oh, now they're hiding their financials or whatever. I know Lori's always, when Lori was in charge, was always really good to explain something if I didn't understand it before the meeting or whatever, and I'm sure Andrew will be the same. So I think if, you know, you have an issue or you have something you don't get or question, you can pull it, like you said, pull it off and discuss it too.
Well, and can we back up for a second? Because just sort of as an overarching concept, do we think in the concept of a consent agenda is a good path forward for our agendas?
I do.
Same.
It's okay with me. I don't really have an opinion on either way. I'm okay.
Our agendas are not like the UG's agenda where they're packed with things that all these 20 or 30 land use and planning things and all the different things that they have on their agenda. Ours isn't like that. You know, there's maybe once or twice that we've had a meeting that's lasted longer than whatever. But I have no problem with the consent agenda and you know, like the appointments to Western and then those type of things, you know, the no-brainer that could be done on a consent agenda. The only one that would be that I've got any concern about all would be the financials. And if we have some way that the finance committee would meet, go over them, not the whole board every time, and then do a quarterly thing, I would feel comfortable with that.
And finance committee meeting and doing that, I mean, it's essentially getting the presentation right now that we're getting, right?
Right.
So I know that's more meetings for the folks on that, but everyone could hop on a Zoom for
Right.
15 minutes if there's no questions.
Yeah, and I'm sure it'll be presented in a different manner when there's someone different
Sure.
presenting it. So,
It used to be that the finance committee was made up of the officers. There was 3 members. There were 3 members on the finance committee.
I'm going to deny that. I'm not joining another committee, sir.
I'm historically,
Didn't want to be an officer right now either.
historically, I'm just telling you, in the past, historically, the finance committee was the president, vice president, and
who else is on? I
Secretary.
know I'm on there. Who-
I think you, Stevie, and David are on it right now. I looked before.
Like
I
it
think that's right.
mirror of the policy committee
Oh, okay.
We'll have it on our
or
teams.
whatever. Yeah, they're great.
The opposite.
Yeah.
Oh, thanks.
No, I meant like, do you ever see Seinfeld? When we were in Bizarro World, everything was the exact opposite. So it's the other 3 board members that, no,
Well,
gotcha. no.
when the finance committee was meeting regularly before we just went to just having to make the presentation
Yeah.
to,
Mhm.
it was the 3 officers.
Well, so what was,
But it was the same presentation.
It's
So
exactly the
I
same
would hear it
presentation.
I've got a question about that. Yes, Jeremy.
And then I would hear it downstairs, same thing.
Finance committee as adopted was Mary, Tom, and Stevie,
Oh, it's you, buddy. Good luck.
because it was just accepted what.
It was a whole.
Whatever it was. Yeah.
Well, and you probably had it on because you're used to having the officers on. Yeah, yeah.
So that's the
I've been on it for a long time.
finance committee. Economic Development Committee is Tom, David, and Rose. Audit Committee, Mary, David, and Brett. Policy Review Committee, Rose, Tom, and Brett.
Could you stop just one second? Jared, did they ever decide on an audit company?
Yes, so we had to do one more year with Reuben Brown.
Okay,
Because when we received all of our responses back, we actually started negotiating with a new company, and there was an issue with how some of the took an issue with a term that didn't take issue with anything. And so we went back and re-upped with Reuben Brown for just one more year, and we're gonna
okay,
RFP it again this year so that we,
okay, so it's still Reuben Brown. Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Thank you, board member who's not on the policy committee. Okay, so consent agenda overall is a proposal, then we should maybe move forward with to the full board and go that direction, yeah?
Yes.
I think so.
Okay, so, all right, so we're good, at least moving forward with that concept. And so looking at this language from the UG, I mean, obviously, we would have to wordsmith it a bit regarding the positions. And honest, well, I guess,
So I have ideas.
please. Yeah, I know, I was going to ask for your input anyway, so thank you.
So I just thought I'd throw that in there so that you had that, but you could do any items that come through a committee that are unanimously adopted. You know, like if it was a big policy, you would want to do it for the whole board. But if we tweak something little that has to be done to update law, you know, you could put it on consent. You could also vote not to have it on consent. So you could do any item and then you could, and that would be financials as well then, if they were approved unanimously. But I would also spell out the
If
meeting
you
minutes.
say if they were approved unanimously, so you're saying that the finance committee would need to meet and then approve that committee, that committee would then approve those and then put it on the consent agenda.
That's one idea. So I was saying that since you liked the idea of,
I'm just,
so I was trying to.
I didn't know whether you were flushing that or whether that was something.
That's not something you have to do, but I was trying to do that to satisfy your criteria of,
Okay, I just wanted a little clarification.
but you don't have to, you know, word it like that. You could just put them straight on there. Think the meeting minutes would be good. I know that there's a board travel form. If you had turned that in advance, you could put that in there.
Never seen one.
you could,
Well,
you could also pull things off, right?
Right,
Right.
Always have that
right. It just takes.
available to any board member.
Yes.
yeah, I think the way we've been requesting travel, I mean, the little history on that was like, people didn't want to secretly, you know, just wanted it out. And I think they wanted every other board member to know when you were requesting travel too. So, I mean, I think it was just to try to not be secretive about going. I don't know. Do you remember when that happened?
I do not.
It was all part of the whole ethics issue.
Then that was 09.
And it
Wasn't even born then.
would be in public
Mhm.
because there, you know, there would be the list, the agenda list.
Yeah, it's all still there. I mean,
With the
consent agenda items are still on the thing. It's just this is on a consent agenda.
And then sometimes you see like the general manager could put items that perhaps are needed for discussion, but that he want maybe some data or some business materials occasionally get put in there.
Okay, not on the committee, but it'll, whatever, y'all decide, I'll have.
Your voice matters to this committee.
Well, it'll have to come to a vote, but to the whole board.
Yeah, I mean, we'll have to,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll definitely bring this to a vote. Because I don't have enough to do. I'm going to go ahead and can I get an electronic copy of this document?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Gonna do the first, yeah.
I'll do it for you. I mean, I don't think it's going to be a lot to tweak, to be honest with you. Do you think that we should list out specifics that could be items on a consent agenda?
I think I would, because you don't have a standing committee and the other routine items is determined, or if the city, the mayor has the agenda setting authority that the president doesn't have here. So I think I would take that off and make it go through, I would have them listed or.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be maybe a joint effort between the general manager and, I mean, it could be any board member. I mean, depending on what the criteria of the consent agenda is, it could be any board member. It doesn't have to be just the president, facto president, or anybody else that would bring it to the general manager.
And the other thing the city has that you don't as a clerk. So they
Right.
have all the official filings, those often get put in there.
Yep.
And so the clerk has discretion over that too, although it's not set out, but you don't really have that here. So,
Okay.
so I think I would list them and then and then you could put in other routine matters.
Yeah, just for the sake of not having to come back to amend this policy every time that we think of another routine matter.
Right.
Something that lists what we know, but if it's including but not limited to, or these and other routine, whatever, catch all, so that if we come up with a form that we think should be in there, we don't have to rewrite it.
I think that is fair. So, okay, so we've got a plan with respect to the consent agenda then. Thank you, board members, for that discussion. Appreciate it. Next item on the agenda is the frequency of meetings. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, and I don't have the citation, the charter, I think it's the charter, only requires BPU to have a regular meeting one time per month. Is that correct, Angie?
That is correct.
Okay, so, you guys know how it's done now. We've got a meeting on the first and third Wednesday of the month generally, and a regular session meeting. We also try to fit in, and as you guys saw at the end of 2024, 19,000 work sessions that we integrated in, particularly during budget time and things like that. And we had a lot of, major things on the docket last year. So I think I think that the thought is there any value to having, I mean, we've got, a new general manager. We have several new executive management staff members. Pardon?
Team.
I'm sorry, I apologize, Mr. Ash. Executive team members, alongside the general manager. And, I haven't had like full discussions with Jeremy on this. I don't know if anybody else has, but I have to believe that, there's probably some new ways of thinking and new ways of looking at this that might be beneficial. And Jeremy, please jump in at any time you want. But so the thinking is to have one meeting a month potentially with like a regular session attached to it. And then the other Wednesday could be, maybe several substantive work sessions, right? Or work session material put into a different time frame. But please go ahead.
No, I mean, I think that's right. I mean, I think it's absolutely your prerogative as long as you're meeting what the charter says, right? And so to tie back into your other point, you could use that other Wednesday for a committee meeting and a work session, 2 committee meetings,
Exact.
exec sessions, whatever you needed to do, should you so choose. And Brett mentioned earlier that, creating more meetings. Well, this would be a way you're kind of already in that cadence.
Right.
That you could knock off 1 or 2 or even 3 different meetings with probably the same amount of time you're used to allotting to that second Wednesday. Or, if there's members of the board that can't be here for whatever reason, you could have your regular meeting the second Wednesday instead of the first, or you would have that latitude. It would require actively managing the schedule a little bit, but I think it would provide you some flexibility should you choose to go that route.
Well, if we have big issues, I appreciate a work session when, if it's Don presenting or so what, because I feel like I'm right there and he can answer my questions that I don't understand. And so I always appreciate a work session when it's something we're going to eventually be trying to decide on or vote on.
You think back to last year, kind of what Ingrid had to rush through, and then we just had to stop because you had to go to, I mean, you could stay at 7 o'clock or 8 o'clock,
Right.
whatever you needed to finish something,
I was just gonna say that's one of the bigger appeals to me is that there is a work session,
You have it.
we're not capped, so we don't end up having to schedule 2 or 3 if we're running over on a big topic. I mean, like, I'm thinking back to, maybe it was the customer service policy. It was one of the big things we did this in the fall, but where it was like, oh, we're running out of time and there's still more questions to be answered. And so I think we ended up coming back together one more time as a committee so that we could try and digest some of the things that had been raised and bring them. I mean, so I like that. The other thing I like about it is I think more often than not, we're gonna end up, if we went that route, with 2 Wednesdays a month filled with things. But there are, 2 or 3 months a year probably where you wouldn't, because there's not the pressing issue, and
Mhm.
it feels easier to have it built in to just say, we don't need to have a work session 2 weeks from now than to say we're canceling the regularly scheduled board meeting.
Right.
Or to,
Agreed.
I mean, at this point, if you have 2 light agendas in a month, we're keeping
Now that-
staff here and everyone's driving here to
Sorry,
say the pledge of allegiance and,
keeping the team here.
I'm sorry. The team, but I mean, there have been meetings back to back, even in my short time, where it's like, that all could have been one Wednesday night, and then if we didn't have pressing business, then everybody, can go home at 5 o'clock instead of staying here till 7:15 or 7:30.
I think to your point, there may be months where all the board members aren't needed for the second one, because maybe it's just a policy committee or
Yeah.
some other committee that they're not a part of, and so they don't need to come unless they.
I feel like I'm part of all of them, except finance.
But I do think, I mean, if you're gonna consider going this way, you can work something to finish without, everybody hold that thought for 2 weeks, or trying to schedule a meeting in between meetings, and then you are creating more time, that you have to try to.
Well, it would be nice to be in a work session and not be looking at the clock, thinking, I'm not.
Getting out and then being late, getting
Yeah.
into the other meeting and
That
all
would
that.
be nice.
Well, and from a team perspective too, if it's, I mean, using last year's example, if we were doing our policy committee on some of those Wednesday nights,
Exactly.
well, it makes sense that Janetta and her team are here, but we don't need the water department present till 7:30 at night, or any of the other folks who you can still get dedicated time with the folks you need without pulling everyone along.
Yeah, we would definitely, make sure that the appropriate team members were at whatever was happening, be it work session, committee meeting. Unfortunately, there's still one-time commitment that's gonna happen.
Or Rob.
I was
But
going to
I-
say, from a technology standpoint, though, it'll make it easier, but I only have to set one room up at a time, and on the weeks that you do your committee meetings. If there isn't any overlap in your board members or staff or team requirements. Then we could potentially set both rooms up and run the.
That was a question, like if we have 2 committees going at once, we need multiple Zooms.
Zoom accounts, we just have.
Just we have 2, but not 3.
Yes, well.
What would we do? Now, does the UG have one formal meeting a month, the Thursday?
They have 2. So it was initially set out that the first Thursday is their regular UG meeting. the last Thursday is they convene as the planning and zoning. What
So
has
there's
happened,
One it's
what's
changed.
happened over the years is that they've started to add a regular meeting on top of the planning zoning. So that you have kind of two agendas. And then they have their special sessions. And then as you're all familiar with, the work or the
Committees.
committees. And those are always on Mondays.
I think it makes sense to have one meeting, one formal meeting a month, and then whatever Wednesday or whatever day we choose to have the second one, that we use that for work sessions, committee meetings and that sort of thing. I think it condense, it would simplify a lot of the planning and have them go back to your calendars and saying, okay, now who's available this day, this day, this day, this day.
Right.
We can get it all.
It would simplify it so long as board members, we are still blocking off that second Wednesday.
Right,
And not scheduling it for the rest of life
Yeah.
yeah. I
and
was
going,
gonna,
oh, I'm sorry, I'm not available the third day anymore. I
We'd have to.
signed up for a basketball league that night.
We would have
yeah, I
to,
was
you know, have
gonna
a.
say, my travel.
I would say we still continue with the first and the third Wednesday. The first, either the first or the third one be the regular session. And the other one be used for committees and work sessions.
My recommendation that you would make the first one that board meeting, that way if it got canceled, you have a fallback position rescheduled. That's if there is a
Good idea.
requirement.
Yeah.
by word.
There's Rob King. Always see.
It's more than just the tech guys.
It's pretty fast.
So the charter does say that you adopt the schedule by policy. And so that is your first rule of procedure is, regular meetings of the elected board shall be held the first and third Wednesdays of the year or as otherwise properly noticed. So that gives you some leeway at the hour of 6 p.m. So we certainly could change that to put the first unless otherwise, decided.
Well, and so, I mean, what it sounds like what I think I'm hearing is that this subset, this policy committee is on board with moving to the full board with this proposal to do one regular session meeting, likely on the first Wednesday of the month, and then the second Wednesday of the month. Pardon me, the third Wednesday of the month would
Sorry.
The third Wednesday of the month would be, set aside for work session, other committee meetings, things like executive sessions, things like that, that we could, have a little bit more robust discussion and not be clock watching for some of that stuff.
And so looking sort of down the year, when you get to the budget season, this may help streamline the actual workshop if you have the ability to.
Schedule 2 or 3.
Well, if you can use those work session time periods like we do now, but you don't have to stop and go there. We can work through things, your questions, this, that, and the other, so that time we get to the budget workshop, maybe there's more of the questions and things that have been answered.
The other thing I hadn't thought about, and there may still be sometimes when we have to schedule something right before the regular board meeting, but just Brooks in my shoes, Stevie's shoes, Rose's shoes. Sometimes when we're packing in on a single Wednesday with the regular meeting, I've got to schedule time off of work. And I'm not saying that, one is more convenient for myself, but just thinking, setting a precedent into the future, I want serving on this board to be something that is accessible to, our community. And
That's right.
that's a potential barrier that we could at least partially alleviate. Not to say there might not be things where it's like, it's the first Wednesday, but gosh, we all need to be in at 4:30 to do a work session because there's something super pressing. But if there was a run there through the, late summer and most of the fall where it's like, well, okay, I can't schedule any day job meetings, after about 3 o'clock on a Wednesday, so.
A lot of that's budget, I think, but that would help if we could do the budget at work sessions that we didn't have to just stop in the fall.
Well, and I'm saying, but in addition, that if it doesn't have to be squeezed in right before the meeting,
Right,
we'll do it 2 weeks from then and it's at 6
Exactly.
o'clock and I can leave the day job at 5 and still be, here in plenty of time.
there was just a lot this past fall.
For the
It's a lot.
IRP.
The IRP took a lot of time and then the budget and general manager,
Budget.
it's a lot.
A lot of things we did last year. Okay, so,
And
okay,
with no raise.
what I heard, haven't seen one, not asking for one.
Sounds like you just maybe double your rate of pay.
That's true.
I mean, I feel like we might have. Thank you. Thank you, board, for considering doubling our pay.
I suspect we are going to end up with a similar amount of minutes spent doing things, except for maybe a couple of months if with this, but in hopefully a more efficient manner and not burdening the team here to the same degree.
I could see that'd be beneficial for the team. And, like, Don or whoever, that wouldn't have to be here if we're not talking about
Power plant, yeah.
Okay, so we'll move forward then. So I guess what we need to talk about potentially then is for the first meeting of March to have a work session to discuss at least these two items. We have one more item on our agenda to talk about moving these items forward. Is that okay? We're good with that?
I think that makes sense to have a time when there could be a bit more discussion about it rather than just.
Yep.
and the whole board would be there.
Yeah.
That's right. Allegedly. Okay, and then so the last topic on the agenda is to talk about, and we had just gone through this, I can't remember if it was last year or the year before, late the year before in 2023. Don't remember, when we sort of changed, how we're dealing with the public discussion at our meetings. And you guys know that prior to this change, we had the public comment section at the very beginning of our meetings where the public could come up and, address the board with various issues, whatever. And what we extended it to was, that was a 5-minute period of time that they could address the board. And what we extended that to was, we cut the time frame back to 3 minutes on the front end. And then we went to a time after we go through the regular agenda. And we have time, a 3-minute time frame again for members of the public to speak about the specific agenda items. And I think, we have seen that work now for about a year. And I don't know that it's working as we maybe intended it to and or thought it might. But I guess I'll just open that up to discussion whether or not folks think we need to maybe change that one way or another.
I think it was born out of, and I know I'm not on this committee and I don't know what to say all the time.
Love that you're in it.
I think it was born out of the fact when we had a large group of people there, they would just blurt out during presentations. They would just blurt out a question or blurt out something they didn't understand. And I think we were trying to corral that into, we'll give you time to answer, we'll give you time to ask a question, answer about, that's what I think it was born out
I
of.
think it
But it never really turned into that because the crowd stopped coming. But I mean, they'll be back. It's almost election season. They'll be back and, how do we want to handle it?
I think that the way I would, my thoughts on it would be either take the public comments instead of having them first, make them sit through the meeting and have them last. So if they wanted to talk about, they could talk about whatever came up during the meeting, or we would, at the end of each agenda item, say, okay, ask the public if they got anything to say about that specific agenda, because the way that it is now, it's just a second public comment section.
Right.
I mean, they're not addressing, in the second portion of it, they're not necessarily addressing what we felt. What we were trying to do was to let them have an opportunity to make a comment on a specific agenda item. Now they're using that as a second public comment thing and getting up and making their comments. So either we move the public comments to the end, or we have the public comment, we ask after each agenda item, if there's anybody that has anything they, want to say about that specific agenda item.
I'm hesitant to
I
do it
don't
after
want to.
every item,
I don't want to do that.
just not
I don't want to.
that any of our attendees to this point would engage in that, but if one wanted to ask questions about every item throughout the meeting, that could end up holding any other members of the public who want to follow along. They're now sitting through a much longer meeting. to get
The
to
only reason I
meeting.
said that is because that's the way that if you go to the standing committees.
Yeah.
That the UG has on Public Works and Safety or the Economic Development, they ask
Mhm,
if there's anybody, and generally nobody has anything to say.
yeah.
And, you get no comments and you just move along to the next item. And I don't know that in looking at our agenda that there'd be that many things that the public would comment on.
It seems like they're going to comment on what they want to comment on. It seems like to me, and I feel like David did a nice job, his first meeting of really curtailing that because it wasn't a question about anything we had discovered. Now,
Well, and one of the things, and Angie, we've talked about this and, these are intended to be comment sections, right? These are not intended to be, let's go ask questions of the board about XYZ, whatever XYZ is. Because, we can open ourselves up to problems, we, the board can, by allowing that to continue. And, so I think we need to do an emphasis on comment period. I actually like the idea of maybe just moving the public comment period to after the presentations are given, after the agenda, we've gone through the agenda items for the night. So if they want to talk about an issue they came to talk about with their bill, whatever about BPU, to address the board, and or if they want to address the board about a specific agenda item that night. And I think maybe we need to be, a little bit more clear. I understand, the public has questions. I get it. I mean, this is a public utility. They can have questions. But, I know our emails are out there. I know my phone number's out there. I mean, we all take calls from constituents. We all take emails from constituents, a lot. And, to the extent that a member of the public has a specific question about, some aspect of the financials, there isn't any doubt in my mind that if the public, if that member of the public or this group or whatever it was wanted to come and have a specific meeting with a specific agenda with the BPU team, that the BPU team would meet with these people and answer these questions. Yes, ma'am.
I sat through a webinar last week on the public comment issue for public meetings, and it really reinforced that any value judgments made on the message, so allowing more time or answering questions, sort of if you're going to answer one person's questions, you have to answer all, even if they're reprehensible, even if you can't, if you're going to allow somebody to go over because you like the message. So whatever and there's less probably than I would have even thought, or it's moving towards, more just even editing the message. For a public speaker, they have a lot more leeway, so that if you're editing the message, and I think if you can edit it towards, it has to be on the agenda item, but it's really hard to have it so very open-ended, especially with the questioning, because then I always run into as timekeeper, the 30, that's a horrible place to be in with the 3. When does the 3 minutes end? So that there's just a lot of pitfalls with when you get into the questioning portion of it.
Jeremy, I don't know if you had any thoughts or comments on this.
No questions, only comments.
Only comments. My comment is I agree with Brett. I think if you did it after every presentation, think back of, some of the unfortunate treatment that some of the team sat through. You might have a week where you have a meeting that there's nothing that anybody's interested in, I can certainly say I'm interested when they get up and talk about the plant or this or that. But the hot button thing's gonna be, what about then when somebody gives a presentation about customer service or, the monthly, the quarterly finance, I mean, whatever it is, and then that becomes, to Brett's point, kind of the open mic period for folks.
But then we're also put in a position of if, to Angie's point, people are, whatever the universal rules are, right? If it's no questions or it's got to be on the agenda item or whatever. If someone is trying to take that time to talk about whatever they want to, then it puts us in the position of having to try and corral someone back in 5 times in the night. Then just becomes can become just combative or I don't know, make people feel like they're being censored over and over when it's really just enforcing the same expectations on everyone.
Well, in the past, board members just didn't interact. When they got up and said their thing, they spoke for whatever and we sat there and didn't interact. But now there's a lot of board members that will ask the questioner something and so that's the time limit issue as well. Because when do you start timing what David said to the person and when the person's, I mean.
Well, our directions to the public are that they have to address the board, right?
Right.
And I mean, if somebody's taking the time to come here on a Wednesday at 6 o'clock to address the board, if they feel like they can't
Yeah.
contact the BPU or somehow get an answer from BPU any other way.
Right. I mean, we just didn't sit there mutely after the person would say, somebody would usually say, Janetta, can you help her solve this or whatever?
Yeah, I think that's a key thing. I think it's important that it's it is one more way for folks to, if they need information or they need something to address, to be addressed, to raise it. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily have to be in back and forth with board members. It could be,
Right.
great, we've got it. Here's the appropriate person. We're gonna,
It used to always be typically like the visitor we had at the beginning of last meeting. Those were typical, somebody that either couldn't
Mhm.
figure out from the phone call to customer care, how to solve her problem, or she just wanted face-to-face to solve the problem too.
And to that point, I would say, the team's always there. So to the extent you just can tell somebody, hey, I see Darren McNews back here, he can talk to you about the tree trimming issue or whatever it is like that is probably better than engaging them at the podium and letting it become just a conversation.
And I don't know that the board member should be the one that singles out we might, as a board member, I might say, Mr. General Manager, do you have somebody here that can,
And that's,
rather than me saying, Dale, news here, talk.
It just makes it harder for Ann to figure out.
no, and I would have no problem doing that if you turned it over to, is there somebody, here from the team that could take their concern? That's what we're here for.
So as far as policy goes, are we writing something into here as far as expectations of what our role versus anyone else's role is in that? And
Well, I mean, I think collectively we're agreeing that there probably should only be one time period for the public to speak versus the 2 that we have now. And the one time period, I mean, are we in agreement that we maybe move it to the end?
my only hesitation with that is like the visitor we had last time who,
The elderly lady?
yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I hear you.
But I mean, that's not to say that moving to the end might not still be the best solution, but
Well, she did stay through the whole meeting.
Okay, well, that's fair. Yeah.
It also truncates some stuff with consent.
That's right.
So if we're meeting once, we'll undo some of that.
I already say all that
Per meeting.
extra money coming.
Yeah, I get that. That may not be enough to derail it, but that's the one.
It's a good point. I mean, and honestly, you know, if somebody feels like they need to come to our meeting to address the board about an issue, and they want to talk about that specific issue and maybe not stay for the rest of our board meeting.
Is it, I don't, I guess right now it's a vacancy, so I'm not putting this on any individual person, but when those folks come, we were previously said, you know, okay, Janetta is here, we're gonna connect you with them, or now, you know, Abby is here. Can that just be a preemptive prompt at the beginning of the meeting of, but I also don't want to turn that into opening the floodgates of.
Right,
But I guess the option
Open in the
exists.
lobby.
right.
The option exists now. If folks want to come and come up to the mic, they,
Maybe we could
They
just
get
open
that-
the lobby on Wednesday nights.
And I think that you could do it that way, or you could, you know, if you didn't want to have them have to all come to the mic, they could note it on the sign-in sheet and, you know, we could filter it that way and say, hey, understand there's, you know, Mr. Parker, Mr. Gilman here, you know, like to meet with somebody about their bill or whatever like that. Hey, here's, you know, Patty Fry, she's happy to.
I like the sign-in sheet because it's still, you're going through the normal process, but then if there are folks. Well, or,
But some of them might just want the board to know
yeah, and
that
that's
there's an
fine.
issue.
Right.
Right.
And
And
then,
if so, there,
At bpu.com, just add me to the
But-
emails. A
but-
lot of people do.
but to your point, Tom, if that's the method, then they're signed up. So they are on that track unless they say, oh, you know what, I got it resolved. We, you know, I put that, I'm going to speak about my bill and
Well, we
they just got
pretty
connected right away.
much know who two people are gonna speak every meeting, basically, or have for the last 6 or so months and probably will continue through the next election cycle is my guess. So although that's been remote, not
Mhm.
live. So I don't feel like we can just stop it. We just need to make sure they're not degrading our staff. In my opinion, that's really important.
The team.
I'm sorry, the team.
Um, I'm gonna erase that word from my vocabulary.
There are,
It'll take a-
unfortunately, it's even harder to do than I originally believed with monitoring the speech. There's just so much leeway and it makes it really hard, especially when we have the taped sessions and those are then out there and broadcast to be rebroadcast. It just creates a.
Well, I mean, so do you think there's any problem with the language we added 2 years ago or 3 years? I don't know, how many years ago? Saying, I mean, I think, I don't know that we have to sit here through abusive language. Do we have to sit through abusive language? So if we have a member of the public that calls Mary the B word, which may have happened in our boardroom.
So profanity,
Mhm.
it's a little different. But especially the board members have very few protections. Other than threats and probably some of the profanity. And they usually get a warning and then the first step is to, then you should ask them to leave before they're removed, but
What about for employees?
there's still
I mean,
not a
as the
lot.
target, not as the commenters.
I'm sorry, yeah. It's still hard to censor that message, harder than I thought. So especially if you are limiting it to the issues on the agenda, that's one thing, but it's harder to censor messages and even if it's the mess,
I feel like we've had more, since I've been on the board, we've had more interaction from the public with sort of the open comment period than we have with respect to the agenda items. And because most people who wind up coming to this meeting, you know, take out the rate hearing, you know, take out some of these things, some of the bigger items that understandably, you know, folks want to appear and have their voice heard. Most people are talking about a bill issue or somebody they know has got a bill issue. Or, you know, something like that. That's, I think, predominantly what we're hearing. And those issues, you know, as we talked about, are generally addressed by customer care in those evenings, right? In that evening out in the hallway, which is great.
And I will say that I think most of the people that come with an issue, a bill issue, and they talk to customer care, I think if they stay for any of the meeting, I think they're a little bit surprised at how much we really want to help and try to solve their problem on the spot. I think if they've never been there before and they come and experience that, I think they go away with the feeling that, hey, everybody in that room tried to help me.
Mhm.
So,
Well, I mean, it's sort of like our community engagement committee, right? That, you know, some of the folks on there are more familiar with the process than
Right.
others. Some aren't. And I think they've been pleasantly surprised at the information they've received at those meetings and the willingness of BPU to actually, you know, try to meet the needs, address the issue, the information, oh, it's actually out there, it's on our website, here's where it is, you know, or whatever. I think they've been pleasantly surprised. And to your point, I think, you know, if more folks interacted with BPU at a meeting or whatever, I think they would be pleasantly surprised.
So policy wise, in this document, we would potentially be, instead of having it split, would be creating just the one on the end of the meeting. I don't necessarily think it's writing into the policy, but if we wanted to have sort of an off ramp for folks who are like, I'm just here to try and get my bill addressed, we could just create the sign-in sheet that says, I mean, it could be topic, or it could just say, is this, you know, are you speaking about an issue with your bill? And if so, would you like to, you know, speak with a staff member now instead of waiting till the comment time? And
Remember?
sorry.
So I just, with how the instructions are to the public, how would you handle that? Specifically, since it says your questions should be to the board. So if they don't have a question, just an issue I need some help with,
Mhm.
then we're gonna give you this off ramp and you can go take care of it and get on about
I
your.
mean, we can change the intro, right? And I honestly don't know what the sign-in sheet says, so I don't know if there's
That's
a
what-
column for, you know, do you need to speak with the BPU team member about a customer care issue? You know, and if they say yes, then we'll know that. And when you get the list, you'll be like, oh, okay, well, you four people, you know, Abby, Gabby, can you guys go help these folks?
We can add something to the sign-in sheet, a checkbox.
What scares me about that is in setting a precedent and having that part of it turn into a open lobby type thing. I mean, everybody starts coming up to the meetings and,
We're all here.
I mean, that's where.
but I mean, for the staff, I mean, all I want
The
to do.
team's here. I mean,
That's where I like having it be.
I don't love it, but
The sign-in sheet. So it's. We're not, like, the process is
I see your time.
otherwise the
Sign-in
same.
sheet. Can I see it?
we just need to look at it.
Sure.
And I don't think that has to be a thing, like, in the message from the
no, it can just be like,
podium. It's just a thing that we catch on the sign-in sheet and go, hey, if we can help you right now and you don't want to, they're welcome to do that and then still come up and say, hey, I'm frustrated, or this, you know, this went great, or whatever. I mean,
Again, we can work, you know, we can always change it down the line if it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not like we are now, thinking about making change. If it doesn't work the way we want it to do work.
And there will just be cycles of time where there'll be more people here. You know,
that's right.
with elections coming up, there'll be more people here. If we were gonna do a rate increase, there's gonna be people here. I mean, there's just some parcel of time where you're gonna have a lot of.
name and contact.
And really, I mean, we rarely get an address anymore.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, we
The
could,
topic, you could put,
we
you know,
could shrink
topic.
that now a little bit, then put.
To the public's point, though, if we are broadcasting and recording the meetings, I can understand why they might not necessarily.
Oh, I get it. I get it for lots of reasons. One question I have about that is, oh, is a good question too.
Should we add RUVU customer?
I didn't hear you.
That was my
Or
question.
maybe-
Wow.
Oh,
I mean, outside of
something.
special interest groups, right, that we understand may have an interest in some things. I'm looking at you at this point. I mean, at our meetings, can we only permit BPU customers
I'm not gonna answer that off the top of my head. I will.
and or Kansas City, Kansas residents that I understand there's BPU customers is probably a better way to do it. Actually have BPU customers in the comment period. I don't know why. I mean, I'm sitting here at, it's a very bad example, right? But no, it's not. No, it's not. I'm Springfield Utilities. I've got a board, I'm having a board meeting, and I've got somebody from Camdenton that's come to my board meeting. Apples and orange, like what? And we've got that here. We all know we do. And if our policies don't affect you because you're not and can't be a BPU customer because you live in part of the territory that's covered by Evergy, I mean, do we have to expend time on that is the question.
I will look into that.
Thank you.
The other question will be verifying it. Because if I say, yes, I am, and I'm
Sure.
not, what then?
Then I guess it goes back to the address, doesn't it? Because if you've got a Bonner Springs, Kansas address, you're not a BPU customer.
On the verification though, I think
Now.
one would have to self-identify the first time. But if you have someone who's coming to every meeting and filibustering, I mean, after the first time, we can go and check if they're a BPU customer and next time. I mean, should it become a long running problem? I think you're always gonna have to deal
Feel
with
that right.
those. They're either telling you the truth or they're not. Once or twice, but
Again, I mean, it's just, we do have a territory.
Right.
We do serve customers in our territory. This board is only germane to that territory. This team is only germane to that territory. We don't have any say over what's going on in Bonner Springs. We just don't. Or Shawnee or Kansas City, Missouri. And so, and again, outside of, I understand, again, there are, obviously we invite, the nonprofits and folks to speak at our meetings. All of those things. So I think maybe we'll leave the question open about where to put the comment period. But yes, let's take that to the full board as well.
You know, discuss it.
Okay.
And
Yes, sir.
seeing as how we haven't changed our meeting yet, we're running up against time to go. I would make a motion that adjourn.
second,
It's been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Hold
I
on, I need my thing, I messed.
Aye.
Be honest, I'm gonna ask you a question though first. You wanted this in another policy review committee to work on language or just straight a work session? Okay. Roll call, Mulvaney Henry,
Aye.
Gonzalez,
I.
Brennan.
Aye.
No, not you. I didn't. Brenneman,
I
Parker.
all right.
This committee's adjourned.